Good evening. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Nedarim, Daf Ayin Zayin, starting right at the top of the page, and we'll be wrapping up to the top of Ayin Ches Amud Aleph. Just some housekeeping notes. I'm leaving town. I'm leaving town on Sunday, and I'll be gone until the next Sunday. And Sunday's daf will be here in person after the 7:45 Shacharis. And throughout the week, I'll post a shiur near Hashem in the mornings, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I'll add a little bit on Thursday and Friday to also cover for Shabbos, since of course we won't be here. I have no idea what about Sunday. I'll let you know. Keep it posted. What?
No, it's like Tuesday or Wednesday.
Yeah, I think it's the middle of the week.
Are you going to be in Miami?
No, I'm going to be in Arizona. So definitely not Miami.
Maybe we could have actually done together.
Maybe, but Lamaisa, I'm like 3,500 miles away from you.
You remember that time at the basketball game? It was a few years ago. Miami Heat game. They had and the entire Marv was Chicago people.
Yeah, I remember that. Yes, it's going to be the same thing when we go to the game in Phoenix, I'm sure. All right. The Gemara says on the top of Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, Tanan Hasam, we have a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah that we learned in Maseches Shabbos on the toward the very end of the Masechta. The Gemara says, Mefirin Nedarim b'Shabbos. A man can do hafara for his wife and or daughter. V'nishalin l'nedarim shehin l'tzorach Shabbos. And you can do she'ela, which is done in a bezdin, or you can ask a chacham. You're allowed to do she'ela on Shabbos, however, only l'tzorach Shabbos. At least that's what's implied from the language in this Mishnah. And to take this question and really expand on it, the Gemara says, this question was asked in the Beis Medrash. We know that Nish'alan l'nedarim l'tzorach Shabbos, but what about Mefirin? Mefirin nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorach Shabbos, or dilma afilu shelo l'tzorach. When it comes to hafara, is one allowed to do hafara for a neder that is made by a wife or a daughter? Is one allowed to do hafara only if it's l'tzorach Shabbos? Meaning she makes a neder that she's not going to eat bread, and now she has a mitzvah to eat a Suda on Shabbos. Or no, odilma afilu shelo l'tzorach, even if it's completely unrelated, basically, fundamentally, is it mutter to do hafara on Shabbos? Tashma, the Gemara tries to present an answer 4 lines down. Tani Rav Zuti de Rav Papi. And here is the brisa that he quotes. Ein mefir nedarim ela l'tzorach haShabbos. One is only allowed to do hafara when it is l'tzorach. So that seems like a very clear and clean shakla v'tarya. Amar Rav Ashi, halot nan hachi. That's great that you said that, but you can't say that because our Mishnah doesn't say that. Where did we see a Mishnah that indicates otherwise? The Gemara quotes a Gemara that we had learned previously. Nadra im chashecha, that if a woman were to make a neder right before it gets dark out, we say mefer la ad shelo techshach. This was our Mishnah that we learned yesterday, that he can do hafara up until it gets dark out. Says the Gemara, if you want to say like your answer, this is the answer of Rav Zuti de Rav Papi, that ein mefir nedarim ela l'tzorach Shabbos. That's not true. If the parameter should have been around whether or not it's tzorach Shabbos, my irya chashecha. Who cares about sunset? You have another problem when a woman makes a neder on Shabbos, which is making a neder on Shabbos. So says the Gemara, according to you, if the neder is not l'tzorach Shabbos, there's no hafar at all. Why didn't the Mishnah make that distinction instead of talking about chashecha? Chashecha is a secondary point. What about 2 p.m.? You're not allowed to do either on Shabbos afternoon. Says the Gemara, you're absolutely right. When it comes to shelo l'tzorach, when we are dealing with a neder that a husband wants to be mefer on Shabbos and it's shelo l'tzorach, that's tanoi. Where do we see this machlokas? This also we saw yesterday, but it wasn't really evident when the Gemara was presented yesterday. Let's speak this out. And the Gemara says, what's the machlokas? Hafaras nedarim kol hayom. That according to the Tanakama we saw yesterday, that hafaras nedarim can take place all day. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Amru me'es la'es, 24 hours. This was a machlokas we saw yesterday. How do we understand each of these shitas? Says the Gemara, a third of the way down. L'manda amar kol hayom in tfelo. According to the one who says that it's only that day, then they are afilu shelo l'tzorach Shabbos mefer. Then a husband can be mefer there. Why is that? Because he has no other option. If she makes a neder on Shabbos afternoon at 2 p.m. and he's not allowed to do hafara after dark, he'll never have an opportunity to do hafara. He's trapped. Therefore, no matter what, we allow that to extend past that day. That is the shita of me'es la'es. And Laman Amar, that's the shita of Ad Shechashecha. And Laman Amar me'es la'es, according to the shita who says it's 24 hours, he makes a neder at 2 p.m. on Shabbos afternoon. He could be made for that neder after Shabbos up until 2 p.m. on Sunday. Then L'tzorach HaShabbos in, Shelo L'tzorach HaShabbos lo. So that's Taka Machlokes in the Tanoim as to whether or not we say it's L'tzorach Shabbos. And that's the Gemara's conclusion on this part of the Gemara. Pretty simple so far. Says the Gemara halfway down, we had quoted in the Mishnah at the top of the page, we had said, that a person can be shoel on a neder. What?
He doesn't get credit for the ace to ace at that time Shabbos. Remember Shabbos under 5, and 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. In essence, he had until 2 p.m. the following day, but in essence, he loses 3 hours because on Shabbos. Well, it's early Shabbos.
He loses 3 hours.
So
yeah. But the point is that his shita is more flexible and allows for hafara to take place not on Shabbos. So when it's Shelo L'tzorach Shabbos, you're right, he loses the 3 hours, but it's Shelo L'tzorach Shabbos anyway. So it's not much of a loss. So the Gemara says, "V'nish'alan l'nedarim she'en l'tzorach Shabbos." A she'ela for nedarim can be done on Shabbos. Yibayalahu. Is this only kishelo haya lahem pnai? O dilma kishaya lahem pnai. What if you actually had time before Shabbos? You just didn't want to get out of bed. You even had an appointment at the Beis Din. Everything was ready to go, and you're like, "I'll do it on Shabbos. I'm a little bit lazy." So we have this shaila b'hilchos yantif. We say that it's important that a person should cook for yantif. And what if you're lazy? Okay, can you still cook for yantif? Okay. So similar. So the Gemara wants to know, is v'nish'alan l'nedarim only true when there was shelo haya lahem pnai, where there was no opportunity before, or even when there was? Tashma, the Gemara says, quoting a brisa, not a brisa, but telling a story, de'iz dekiku le rabbanon librei de Rav Zutra berei de Rav Zeira. The rabbis were de'iz dekiku. They paid attention to the son of Rav Zutra, who was the grandson of Rav Zeira. And what that means is that that was a case where it was on Shabbos, and he had time before Shabbos to take care of this neder, but he didn't. So what do we see from this story? We see that even if you have time on Friday and you don't do it, even lechatchila, a person can be shoel a neder on Shabbos. Savar of Yosef Lemeimar nish'alan dar b'Shabbos b'yachid mumche in b'shalosh idyotos lo mishum demischaze kedina. He says all of this nish'alan nedarim on Shabbos is great, but that's only true when it comes to a yachid mumche. That's allowed. You go to the one posek, but to pull together 3 hedyotos to form what appears to be a Beis Din should not be allowed. Beis Din's not allowed to meet on Shabbos, and therefore it's mishum de mischaze kedina. So therefore, Rav Yosef was of the opinion that you're not allowed to have 3 people come together to be shoel on a neder. Amar le'abaye, it's not really true, because kevan de sfiralan, since when it comes to being shoel on a neder, it's afilu me'umad, even if the Beis Din is standing, which is typically not the way they run Beis Din. Afilu bekrovim, if they're relatives, which a Beis Din cannot have relatives among them. Ve'afilu b'layla, and a Beis Din doesn't officiate at night. Lo mischaze kedina. So the Gemara argues this point. According to the first approach, you're allowed to have, says the Gemara, you're allowed to have only the chacham, only one person be shoel and neder, but not a Beis Din because it looks bad. And Abaye says that's not true. You can even have a gimel hadyotos, because the rules of Beis Din don't apply to the gimel hadyotos. They could be standing in the hall at shul. One could be standing. They could be brothers. It doesn't matter. The gimel, it's like by Taras Nedarim. The gimel hadyotos doesn't matter what. We sit down because it's typical, but you don't need to do that, really. That was the Gemara's conclusion here as well. Well, I should say it's a machlokas. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, Halacha, Mefirin Nedarim Balayla. We're switching back. It's very important to remember the differences between Hataras Nedarim and Hafaras Nedarim. Hataras Nedarim is what we do. That's Hatara. Hafaras Nedarim is we're talking about a woman. We're going back now to the conversation about a woman. So the Gemara says, what do you mean that Ra was of the opinion that we're Mefir Nedarim Balayla? That's not a chiddush at all. Says the Gemara, B'hamas Nisani, that we already learned in a Mishnah, no chidushim. So what's Rav coming to teach us? And the Gemara responds, V'hamas Nisani Nadra Balele Shabbos, that if she makes a neder on Shabbos, that we can undo the neder. So that was the question. And the Gemara responds, Elaima Halacha Nish'alin Balayla. Oh, so the chiddush is that we can do she'ela at night, not just not just to do hafara. Okay. Amar le Rabbi Abba le Rav Huna Amar Rav Hachi. Did Rav actually say the sentence of Nish'alin Balayla? Did Rav actually say that? And the Gemara responds, Amar le Ishtik. No, he was just quiet when I was talking about it. So I had said, you can do She'ela Balayla, and Rav didn't say anything. He just sat there quietly. And the Gemara says, well, what kind of silence was it? Amar le Ishtik Ka'amris o Shasi Ka'amris. Was he just being quiet and he was disagreeing with you? Or Shasi, come take a drink. Here's a cup, which is a greater sign of agreeing. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ika Bar Avin. The case was, is the kik le Rav le Rava. This can't be Rava. That can't be Rava. The Rav Chananel. Yeah. The name was changed to Rav Chananel. Rabba lived 2 generations after Rav. The math doesn't work out. So the Gemara, of course, had to change it. So Izakik le Rav le Rabba. Rabba, or Rav Hananel, went over to Rav to be Shoel on a neder, and it was at night. Where did this take place? Top of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. It took place Bekituna de Bei Rav. Bekituna de Bei Rav, take a look at the Ran. Kituna de Bei Rav is Becheder Shel Beis HaMedrash. That's like the room that we're in. It's a room within the Beis Medrash. Maybe this is actually Beis Medrash, and that's a side kitchen. I don't know exactly. Becheder Shel Beis HaMedrash implies that you're in the Beis Medrash. Okay. And what was the din over there? There, that case was Omed Yechidi Ubalayla. We see over there that Rav was standing, he was by himself, and it was nighttime. So this is how the Gemara determines that Rav was of the opinion that you can be Shoel in Balayla, because Bididi Hava Uvda, says the Gemara, I watched it happen with my own 2 eyes. That was Rav Chananel. Rav Chananel went over to ask for She'ela from Rav, and Rav was by himself, and he was standing, and it was nighttime. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Amar Rav Nachman, can't be Rabba. Rabba and Rav Nachman lived in the same generation. It had to be the flow of events. They're peers. They're not generationally different. So the Gemara had to change it to Rava, because Rava was 4th century of Amoraim, while Rabba was 3rd. And he says in the name of Rav Nachman, Halacha nish'al nedarim omed yechidu v'alaylu b'shabbos v'krovim. A person is allowed to be shoel on a neder while the chacham is standing, even if he's alone, ubalayla, even at night, ubashabbos, even on Shabbos, ubakrovim, even if the person asking for she'ela and the chacham giving the she'ela are relatives. We're synthesizing and combining and distilling our Gemara from the last many lines. This is not uncommon in Gemaras that are organized this way. There's a curriculum that focuses on different types of sugyas. This is what we would call a classical Amoraic sugya. We started very early with Rav and Rav Hananel. We moved on to Rav Nachman and to Rava's 4th century. So this is pretty typical to see that as the generations move through a sugya, not every sugya is wired this way. Some sugyas have the Amoraim out of age order, but when the Amoraim are in age order, this is as some of the Meforshim refer to as an Amoraic sugya Amorais. And the reason we know that is because it's layered by the age. Fascinating thing to be discussed another time. So then the Gemara asks, wait 1 second. Omeid, how can you say he's allowed to stand to be a dayan? After all, v'hatanya, Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, 5 lines down, Yorad Rabban Gamliel min hachamor. When Rabban Gamliel was asked to do she'ela for a neder, he got off of his donkey, v'nis atev, he wrapped his head, v'yoshav, and he sat down, v'hicha lo nidro. So we're being like so simplistic about it, and we're all Amoraim here, says the Gemara. Rabban Gamliel is a Tana. So how can you say, all the Amoraim say, like, so Pasha, don't worry, you're allowed to stand for Ataras Nedarim. Yet Rabban Gamliel got off the animal and he wrapped himself up like he was sitting in Besdin, like a proper person.
Maybe you want it to be comfortable.
No. These are all halachos about being a dayan. You're not allowed to be passively involved if you're doing a real din Torah. That's not allowed. They have rules. You have to be sitting. But
there's also a difference between standing.
That's true, but I presume
when you get off the donkey, you're standing. So the next move proves that he made a move.
He says, "V'nisate b'yasha." Yeah. This was for sure for
Even
halachic purposes.
The donkey was the problem. He
right.
Been standing, he would have been fine, but yet he went and sat.
Right. There's no question that the context here is that he was specifically sitting for the sake of the din Torah. That was poslan b'charata. That was not she'ela. It's a little bit of a different sugya. So the Gemara says, what should we do? We have Rabban Gamliel, who has a great precedent-setting source. He's a Tana, and he says you should sit in these cases. Everybody else seems to say stand. How do we answer this? Says the Gemara, and the Gemara's text here is very, very difficult. I'll just spare you by reading it the way that it should be read. Rabban Gamliel Savar, Ein Poschen Becharata. Rabban Gamliel was of the opinion that you're not allowed to be posech becharata. The only way to undo a neder is me'aker nedarim bo'inan u'boi iyune ahachi yashav. The only way that he allows for the undoing of a neder is not with the casual way in which we've been discussing. Rabban Gamliel was a Baal Shita. He was of the opinion of ein poschen becharata. You're not allowed to have any low-level dissolutions of a neder. Only the right way to do it. That requires a bezdin, and therefore ahachi yashav. But in our case, it's Rav Nachman. Remember, Rava was asked from Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman Savar, and now we remove a word, Poschen becharata ve'afilumum, and he said, no, you can be much more casual about it. Charata is easy. You regret what you did, I do. All right, so I'll be mater you. Mutter lach, mutter lach, mutter lach.
And so you're saying since his Svara is different, that requires work. So that's showing the proper cover by sitting down and working it, not just standing and high differ bounds.
The language of the Gemara is that it's ba'inan is uzubai iyune, meaning it's more focused work. It's iyun. You learn B'kiyas, we can move quickly like we do in Daf Yomi. But if we're going to learn a sugya b'iyun, we could stay on 2 lines for 2 weeks, which sometimes sounds really relaxing. The part of the Gemara here that's difficult is that it looks like there's a machlokas between Rabban Gamliel, who's a Tana, and Rav Nachman, who's an Amora. That's very difficult. That's shver. And it must be, although the Gemara doesn't quote it here, and we did see this earlier, I just don't remember the names, but you might actually, which is that maybe there's a Tana who is behind Rav Nachman to say, Poschen becharata. What?
Yes.
Yeah. You can, but this wasn't Rav. No, the din that was quoted by Rav is that you can do she'ela at night. He wasn't talking about poslan becharata. That's actually not our sugya. That's just we're using poslan becharata to answer up what seemed to be a stira from Rabban Gamliel. So I don't know the answer to the question, but it is odd. Yeah. Tosfos in the Ksav Yadai, which I have at the bottom here, just gives a very simple explanation. I don't see it. Open to answers if you have any. One more Marimakom and then what, like Rav Nachman?
Yeah. Why
do you say that?
Because in the 4th line of the Rav, because of the Rav result, it would be done to kind of post the Karata, make up.
Oh, that's the Rashba. There's your answer. Oh no, the Rashba.
No, but he does paskin that way, so he wouldn't have made that mistake.
No, it's not a mistake. We just don't know the answer. But it's an honest and fair question to ask in the Gemara. It's yeah. Okay, 3rd of the way down. Amarle Rava le Rav Nachman. Chazi mar hayr me Rabbanan de asami ma'arava. Did you see this person who came from the west, who came from Eretz Yisrael? And he said, is the kikule Rabbanon, that they were paying attention to the she'ela of a neder, libre de Rav Huna bar Avin, v'shar le nidre. They listened to him. And says the Gemara of Amrulei, zil uboy rachme al nafshecha dechatos. You should go, you did something wrong. You should get some tshuva, you did something wrong. Tani Rav Dimi achua de Rav Safra kol hanoder, afapishu mekaimo, nikra chote. That a person, even if they fulfill what they do, they're still going to be considered a chote. Amar of Zvid Mikra. From where do we know that there's an idea that a neder is connected to a chait? And this Gemara is different than the previous Gemaras that we've seen before. Initially, we saw this Gemara that says that kol hanoder kilu bana bama v'chol mekaimo kilu hiktir aleha kilu hiktir revela korban. But here the Gemara gives a pasuk in Chumash as a marimakom, which seems to imply that making a neder has an elevated status of Isser. Look at the pasuk. The pasuk Amar of Zvid Mikra. When you hold back from making a neder, you won't have a sin. And the Gemara makes the simplest of the yukim. Halochadalt. If you don't hold back from making a neder, ikachet. You've done something wrong. And the Gemara says that according to this, and this is quoted in the Torah in Shulchan Aruch and Yoreh Deis and in Reish Gimel, that you're not allowed to make a neder.
Is it because you're always angry when you make a neder?
No. The pasuk is not written with. The pasuk is just written if you want to avoid averos, don't make a neder. No, it's not because of the anger. And this is different, and this requires more research. Now we've seen 3 shitas on making nedarim. One is this one, which seems to be a pasuk in Chumash. I mean, it sounds like it's d'oraisa from the phraseology of the Gemara. No? The previous Marimakom was the Wanabaki Ilubana Bama, which was just a mashal hedyot and probably not d'oraisa. And the third shita is that you're allowed to make a neder. Okay. Says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, 4 lines before the wide lines. Tanya, ha'omer li'ishto. If a man says to his wife, "Kol nedarim shetaduri, efshi shetaduri," any neder that you make, I don't want you to make. Or if you say, "Ein zen neder," that this isn't a neder, says the Gemara, lo amar klum. This is not the language of hafara, even though it feels like hafara when you hear it. But the Gemara says that's not considered sufficient. If a person were to say, Yafe asis, you did a great job, you hear your wife make a neder and you say, great job, or Ve'ein kamoscha, there's nobody like you, which I could understand in 2 different ways. One is positive and the other is a little, the way you shouldn't be. All on the tone. It's one of those text messaging issues. Sweetheart, there's nobody like you. So if he uses one of those languages, the Gemara doesn't think like I do. The Gemara assumes that it's a compliment. And had you not made the neder, I would have made the neder on your behalf. In all of those cases, dvar of kayam. And Omer Darsheni, this Gemara is a little bit difficult. Certainly the first line's a little bit difficult. How explicit do you need to be that you don't want a neder? Ein zen neder.
What is the question? What would be the form? This sounds pretty good.
Oh, that was the language that we.
That
was the language of that we saw mufar lichi batel lichi. That would be the perfect language. That's the Spitz language, yeah. But ein zen neder, it's so difficult to understand how that's very difficult. How does that even work? There's a big Ron here, which actually looks at the language of Kol Nedarim Shetaduri, which actually seems to be a futuristic comment. That was very much the conversation we've been having the last many days with Rabbi Eliezer, who said that I'm going out of town. Any Nedarim you make over the next couple of weeks don't count. So the Ron says that's not what's going on here. And this is actually a past tense, not a future tense. And really, she already made the Nedarim. And I'm coming in after the fact and saying Kol Nedarim Shetaduri, that you made, not that you will make, even though the grammar of the Gemara doesn't play that way. That's why the first approach of the Ron is the first approach that I shared, which is that you're going to make. But Lemaisa, that's not how the Ron concludes. The Ron seems to say the other way. But Ein Zen Neder, it's lo amar klum. This is a 0. You have to use the formulaic language. Okay, first of the very long lines. Lo yomar adam liishto b'Shabbos. When we are talking about Shabbos, and this is really a continuation, even though there are 2 dots here. But when it is Shabbos, don't say the classical language of mufar lichi and batil lichi kiderech she'omer b'chol. You shouldn't say the classical language of I'm undoing your neder. That you should not do. Rather, El Omer's Allah tliva ochli tliva shasi. If she makes a neder on wine, you can hand her a cup of wine. Devarim pshutim, I don't want you to hold on to this neder. I would never mislead you. Lifnei, you're going to be fine. Drink up, no problem. That neder batal me'elav. And under those circumstances on Shabbos, there is bittul. Amar Rav Yochanan, v'tzarich sheyevatel belibo. We have to make sure that when we are being mefer a neder, that it is done belibo. Tanya, this is actually connected to a machlokes in the Tanaim. Beishamai omrim b'Shabbos mevatel belibo bechol motzi b'sfasav. Beishamai says that on Shabbos all you need to do is be mevatel belibo, but during the week you actually have to say explicitly batel lichi, mufar lichi, whatever the language is. You never need to articulate your feelings. You could be mevatel with just your heart. Last din of the day, and this will take us to the top of Ayin Chesamid Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara says on Ayin Zayin Amid Beis Amar Rav Yochanan, Chacham she'amar b'lashon bal. Let's say a Chacham who normally would use language of she'ela, right? And he uses the language of a Baal, which is Batalichi, Mufar Lichi, right? If they switch their languages. So then the Gemara says, Ubal Sha'amar B'lashon Chacham. A husband says to his wife, Charata, She'ela, the language is a Bezdin, says the Gemara, Lo Amar Klum. We're not using the wrong languages here. There is a level of specificity that is necessary when we use words to do hafara. Where do we know this from? The Gemara says, the Tani, we have a brisa. The pasuk reads, Zeh hadavar. I'll read the whole pasuk for you. Vaydaber Moshe el Roshei hamatos livnei Yisrael lemor, Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. Zeh, this specific davar. So what's the drasha? Hachacham matir ve'ein baal matir. I mean, what the pasuk is not, we're totally an out of context pasuk, right? So
No, it's right, it's the beginning of the parsha of Nedarim, beginning of Maseches. It's the introductory pasuk, I guess.
but this pasuk is,
The next pasuk is Ishki Nidar Neder.
no, I understand. But Zeh hadavar,
You know,
this is the thing, is not like,
I should see Hashem.
but it's not, the psukim that follow is speaking generally about Nedarim. But the word Zeh hadavar isn't referring to a neder. It's the following is what we're going to be talking about. It's in the sugya, but it's like it doesn't like when you want to quote the pasuk of Yishai Kimenu v'Yishai Firenu and give me a drasha that without hafara there's no bittul. I understand that. This feels a little. I'm not right. I'm not right. It just struck me that way. But yeah. Okay. So that's the drasha. Chacham matir ve'ein habal matir. The language of Hatorah is the language of a Chacham, and the language of the Baal cannot be that way. Sheyachal, you might have thought,
The whole part would have to be.
Zeh hadavar. I understand. It's just not like Ledugma. You could have had it by the pasuk Yishaya Kimenu v'Yishaya Firenu. Habal mefer behafara ve'achacham mefer b'matir. I could have seen the drasha elsewhere that would have been more pointed. I'm wrong. Don't listen to me. I'm wrong. I'm reacting to the location of the drasha. It's a little odd. It's something like okay. Yeah. I mean, you should listen to me in general because I'm standing here talking, but for my little sidebar soapbox, you should Sheyachal, I might have thought of Chacham she'ein mefer matir, that a Chacham who's not the one doing the hafara to the wife, that's really the husband, but he can be matir. Then the Baal shemefer, the Baal who is doing hafara, eino din shematir, maybe he should for sure be able to use the lashon of the Chacham. Says the Gemara, Talmud Lomar Zeh hadavar, and quotes the same exact drasha again. Top of Ayin Chesem and Aleph, Chacham matir ve'en Baal matir. And Tanya Idach, another brisa with a similar drasha, Zeh hadavar Baal mefer ve'en Chacham mefer. Same exact idea. Sheyachal uma Baal she'ein matir mefer, just like a Baal who is not able to be matir can be mefer. Chacham shematir eino din shemefer. Maybe the Chacham can also use the language of hafara. It's kind of inverted from the previous brisa. Talmud Lomar Zeh hadavar Baal mefer ve'ein Chacham mefer. That when a Baal is doing hafara toward his wife, he has to use the right language. And when a Chacham is doing being matir for a she'ela, he should use the language of Hatorah. We'll stop right here. Mirza Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with Daf Ayin Ches. Wishing you all a beautiful night.